Hello and welcome to the History of Maritime Wrestling, Episode 5. On this episode, I take a look at the return of Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. At the end of the last episode, I mentioned that Rene Dupree wanted to wrestle, so his father, Emile Dupree, started up the territory again. This era of Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling lasted from 1997 to 2001. Rene Dupree in the early days would wrestle under the name Rene Rougeau. Three of the young wrestlers that were wrestling for Grand Prix Wrestling during this era would also be the reason maritime wrestling would survive for years and years to come. Cowboy Mike Hughes, Brody Steele, and Wildman Gary Williams all got their start in this era of Grand Prix Wrestling. In 1997, Grand Prix would book some pretty big names to wrestle on these tours. Names like Rick Martel, Hustler Rip Rogers, Bad News Brown, and future legends like Don Callis, Scott D'Amore, Christian Cage, and the future Edge wrestling under the name Sexton Hardcastle. Originally, Bulldog Bob Brown was going to be the booker for that season, but 1 month before the season started, Bulldog Bob Brown died of a massive heart attack, so he was replaced by Hustler Rip Rogers. Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling would return in 1998, but the big name talent were all gone. Edge, Christian, and Don Callis would all be in the WWF. Rick Martel was in WCW, and Bad News Brown just retired. The young up-and-coming stars of the Maritimes were now in the main event. Brody Steele was wrestling under the name The Mighty Hercules. Wildman Gary Williams was wrestling under the name of Wildman Austin. Future Real Action Wrestling star Massive Damage was wrestling as Rick the Bruiser. Ontario wrestler Joe E. Legend was in the territory, and Scott D'Amore was back in the territory. Old school Grand Prix legends like Leo Burke and Butcher Vachon were also there in 1998. 1997 and 1998 were two good seasons for Grand Prix Wrestling, but the most memorable season would be the Legends Tour of 1999. A lot of the legendary names from the past would return to Grand Prix Wrestling. Leo Burke, The Beast, The Cuban Assassin, and No Class Bobby Bass would all be back in the territory. Canadian wrestling icon Chi Chi Cruz was back in Grand Prix Wrestling. Also there in 1999 was the Cuban Assassin 2, Richie Acevedo. It's uncertain if 1997 and 1998 had a championship belt, but 1999 certainly did have one. They had the Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling Continental Championship. The champions that year would include the Mighty Hercules, Joe E. Legend, Chi Chi Cruz, and Kurgan. Kurgan had just left the WWF that year. A lot of people say that this run from Kurgan from 1999 to 2002 is his best run in wrestling. In 1999, Emile Dupree started to get competition from other promotions, Real Action Wrestling and Mainstream Wrestling, running shows in late 1999. At some point between 1999 and 2000, Brody Steele, who wrestled as the Mighty Hercules, and Cowboy Mike Hughes would leave Grand Prix and they would join Real Action Wrestling. I've always wondered why they left Grand Prix so abruptly. My theory was that once Rene Dupree outgrew Grand Prix Wrestling, the territory was going to shut down. Where do these guys go? How do you keep wrestling in the Maritimes if there are no promotions? So they left for Real Action Wrestling and would make a name for themselves in that promotion. In the year 2000, Rene Dupree, Kurgan, Chi Chi Cruz, The Beast, The Cuban Assassin 1 and 2, and Wildman Austin would all return. New faces coming into the territory would include the Natural Bobby Roode, Todd the Bod Douglas, Hans Schultz, and Evil Eddie Watts. The Continental Championship is back in Grand Prix. The title would be traded back and forth between Wildman Austin and Chi Chi Cruz. Other wrestlers in the territory in 2000 would include Mad Dog Nielsen, Big Al the Godfather, Tommy Twilight, Rick Valentine Jr., Tony Gold, and Dr. X. The 2001 season would be the final and the shortest, only running for 3 weeks. We would see a lot of different faces wrestling in Grand Prix in these 3 weeks, the likes of Ruffy Silverstein, Crusher Coleman, Rock Evans, Flesh Gordon, Mentolo, Scott Ingram, and Vance Nevada. Vance Nevada would even bring the Canadian Unified Junior Heavyweight title and defend it versus Mentolo. Rene Dupree later on this year would sign with the WWF and would later on become the youngest man to ever hold a championship belt in the WWF WWE at the age of 19. The big name stars that weren't in Real Action Wrestling yet would find their way there, like Wildman Austin and Bobby Roode. Real Action Wrestling will be the topic of the next episode. I would like to personally thank Vance Nevada, who helped me a lot with these episodes, giving me information. So to Vance Nevada, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Vance Nevada is a true wrestling legend. He did not have to help me out with this, but he did, and I can't thank him enough. So with that being said, thank you all for listening. Next episode, we will cover Real Action Wrestling. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you next week.